details. This webinar is being recorded and will be sent to all attendees after the webinar. You can ask a question at any time. To submit yours, please click on the Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen, type it into the question box area that appears, and then hit the Submit button. And now we'd like to know just a little bit about our audience. So this is a polling question. The question is, does your organization monitor respective third parties on a regular basis? So there are your 4 choices. Click your answer right there on the screen itself. And after you've done that, hit the Submit button. So, does your organization monitor respective third parties on a regular basis? You can choose between yes, we try to, we make an attempt to, no, or I really don't know, I'm not sure. So once again, click your answer right on the slide itself, and after you've done that, be sure to hit the Submit button as well, and that way you will be registered as far as what's going on with your organization. And here's a look at our results. So, boy, 69% are saying yes, we do, and the other 20% are saying we try. Kristen, this is something you can bounce off of, but first I'd like to say welcome, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Mary. So I would first like to start off by saying thank you for taking the time to join me today to talk about the importance of third-party intermediary questionnaires and how they can help you mitigate risk. So over the course of the next hour, we're going to focus on why questionnaires are a great tool to leverage for collecting information, how to create an effective onboarding questionnaire and the key factors to consider, why compliance certifications are important, and then what considerations you need to make whenever working with an international jurisdiction. And then once you receive that data, why it is important to screen the data that is provided within that questionnaire. So if we take a look, and I'm going to scroll to the next slide, if we take a look at just the initiation of a compliance onboarding workflow, what you'll see on my screen are just a few steps of how the process begins. So in an ideal situation, the business unit will identify a third-party intermediary that they want to work with. And what they'll do is that they will notify compliance of this third party. From there, and you can see the asterisk and the stars next to step 2, compliance will initiate the due diligence, and they will perform an initial screening of the third-party intermediary. That is done just to provide you with a cursory overview to ensure that that third-party individual or entity is not sanctioned. From there, the compliance manager or individual will send out a questionnaire requesting the respective information on that entity or individual. The third step of the process is compliance will perform an analysis of that screening. So again, they'll make sure that they're not sanctioned, that they're not hitting any global sanctions list, just to make sure that at a cursory view that third party is okay to interact with. The next step is that the compliance individual will then go about screening all of the data that is provided within that questionnaire. From there, a decision will be made as to whether or not you should contract with that third party. And if you decide to proceed with contracting with that individual or entity, you'll notify the contracts department. You'll ensure that your T's and C's and your payment terms and structure are all where they should be. And then from there, once that third-party intermediary is contracted with, you'll then go about deciding how frequently you're going to monitor them based on their low, medium, or high risk that they pose to the organization. And Mary, it looks like we have a poll question for the audience before we get into the questionnaire and certification.
Okay.
I'll hand it over to you.
All right. So the question is your organization currently leveraging questionnaires and certificates? And I guess we'll take them both together, right? So questionnaires and certificates, or do you want that to be or certificates? I guess you can't have one without the other, so maybe we'll go with and. And so is it yes? Well, we try, no, or I'm really not sure. So did I get that right? You can't have one without the other, right, Kristen?
Yes, that's correct. Or
okay.
In an ideal world, you should have both. So yes.
Okay, great. Let's see. We'll go ahead and give the audience just a little bit more time to decide yes or no. And with that, we will move to our results for the question, is your organization currently leveraging questionnaires and certificates? And here we go. A lot of them are, and once again, together, it does add up to quite a bit. What do you think, Kristen?
Yeah, I think these are actually pretty good results. It looks like about, just under 60% of you are leveraging questionnaires. So for those of you who are, I think the key takeaway for today is going to be to cross-reference what you're currently asking against the questionnaire that I'm going to display in just a moment. And for those of you who make an attempt to or who aren't sure or know you don't send out questionnaires and certifications, certainly you'll just want to take note of the content that we cover today because the questionnaire that I pull up on my screen here in just a minute is going to be fairly comprehensive. So thank you for that, Mary.
Oh, you bet. We'll move you right on to the next slide.
So now we're going to jump into conducting like a comprehensive overview of the type of content that you should include within a questionnaire. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to share my desktop with all of you. And my recommendation is that if it does not pop up immediately is to refresh your screen, but give it just a second for the system to connect on my end, and I will let you know when I am officially sharing.
So then that's how we'll know we should officially press F5 to refresh.
Yes.
But we don't need to start doing that yet.
Okay, so here in just a second, you should be able to see my screen. And as you can tell, what I am showing right now is a mock questionnaire that I have created for purposes of this webinar. And you can see that my company name on my questionnaire, it does state Kristen Franks Manufacturing Incorporated, Sample ABC Candidate Questionnaire. So what I'm going to do is I am going to cover all of the sections and questions that are within this questionnaire, so hang with me. And without much further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump right in and get started. So the first thing that I want to point out is that I have divided my questionnaire into 8 sections. Within these 8 sections, you will see that I'm going to focus on A, the business information, B, reference information, personnel information, vetting out potential conflicts of interest, compliance information, in Section F, if the organization has been under a similar review. In Section G, I'm also going to request supporting documentation. And then in Section H, I'm actually going to request acknowledgement that this third-party individual or entity is going to abide by my policies and procedures and my code of conduct and my stance on anti-bribery and corruption. So in Section A, you can see that I am requesting the candidate's full legal name and physical address. So I first want to point out that an entity's legally registered name can sometimes vary than a DBA or doing business as name. So if you know that the organization is using 2 different names, a DBA and a legally registered name, you're going to want to collect both names so that you can screen both names against any possible sanctions and enforcements or adverse media criteria. In Section A2, you can then see that I go on to request the type of organization that the entity is established as. So is it a sole proprietorship? Is it a publicly traded organization? Is it a partnership? Is it an LLC? This is all very helpful because, as we all know, public have much greater responsibility in order to be transparent and abide by the law, as do private corporations, and they're under much more scrutiny. So that's going to be a key takeaway for you in Section A2. In section A3, you can then see that I'm requesting what the primary industry is for this organization. And I'm sure that all of you know this, but there are some organizations such as oil and gas or energy or mining and mineral extraction that pose more risk than other types of entities out there. So this is going to be also a key takeaway for you in section A3. In section A4, you can then see that I go on to ask, does the entity, are they or that individual looking to operate in the capacity as a vendor or a supplier to the organization, or are they looking to act as an agent or a consultant or a channel partner? There are various types of relationships that third parties can pose to an organization, so it's really important to kind of vet this criteria out. In section A5, you can then see that I go on to request on what date was the business established. This is very helpful because if they were established on August 12th of 2019, which was yesterday, you would certainly want to know, are they a brand new startup business? Do they have relevant experience to operate within this market? And so forth. You can then see that within A6, I go on to request the total number of employees within the organization. In section A7, I then go on to ask in what countries or country does the organization provide services. So again, this is very important for purposes of whenever you're conducting your due diligence. In section 8A, you can then go on to see, let me scroll back up there for just a second, if there are mandatory business registrations that are required for the candidate, please list them here, and you'll see that I have it underlined that I'm requesting copies of those various business registrations. And for those who work in international jurisdictions, I am requesting English translations for those registrations. So this is very important because if you have someone who is going to perform services for you within the U.S. and within, let's say, Mexico, you'll want to receive business registrations for that entity or individual within both jurisdictions. Another key takeaway from this is that you're going to want to ensure that your business registrations are not expired and that they are active registrations, which is why that I have asked the individual or entity what is the expiration date of that registration. In section A9, you can then see that I go on to request if the candidate is required by law to register with any other government agencies. I also ask the same thing within section A10 if they're registered with any other organizations such as the Chamber of Commerce. If they are, then you can also see within those boxes that I've created that I'm requesting the registration documents in English, and then I'm also requesting the registration numbers, who they're registered with, their start date, and their expiration date. So that's something that you're going to want to make sure that you have a copy of. Within section A11, you can then see that I go on to ask if the candidate has any subsidiary organizations. If they answer yes, then I request those respective details. In section A12, I then ask, does the candidate have any branch offices? Again, if they answer yes, I request those details. Same thing for section A13. Does the candidate have a parent organization? So 11, 12, and 13 are all important questions because they help paint a holistic picture on where the individual or the entity have an operations presence. So just keep that in mind that these are also questions that you're going to want to ask whenever you're working with individuals or entities. In section A14, I then go on to ask the third party to provide their background information on the candidate's experience and expertise. So you can see that I go on to request either a company brochure, a recent annual report, or any respective documentation that they have to provide. So again, this is important because you're really wanting to determine if they have the relevant work experience that they need to operate on behalf of your company. So if we scroll down to section B, you'll see that I then go on to request reference information. So again, this is just important. It's fairly straightforward. You're just looking to verify that their work experience and history within the industry is relevant. So this is also helpful. So in section B2, I then go on to ask, has the candidate included a recent audited financial statement? Yes or no. If they say yes and they provide you with those audited financials, that is fantastic. You can also see within the questionnaire, though, that I ask, if the candidate is less than 2 years in business, please explain how the startup capital for the business was obtained. This is important because you're going to want to understand and receive an explanation for their source of funds for that startup capital. If the candidate is unable to provide audited financials or to substantiate how they received their source of funds, you can then see that if no, please provide at least one financial reference. So this can either be their current banking relationship or a supplier or a vendor or some sort of other third party that they have business dealings with. And this is really just to make sure that the company that we're contracting with is financially stable. So here's just a section for a financial reference. In section C, you can then see that I go on to request personnel information and information on key individuals. So you can see that within sections C1, 2, and 3, that I have asked the entity or individual to completely and accurately fill out the requested information. So you can see in area C1, please provide a resume or a CV for all key people listed in A, B, and C. So key people being list all owners, partners, or shareholders of the candidate. And then I also note that the percentage should total 100%, and that if any owners, listed owners, are other than individuals, please provide ownership information for the entity on a separate page. Full disclosure of ownership is a prerequisite for retention. I think that having this caveat within the questionnaire is important because it just demonstrates to that third party that they need to be extremely transparent with you in regards to who owns and has any sort of shareholder responsibility for that organization. In section B, you can then see, does the candidate have a board of directors? If yes, complete the requested information. If no, if they don't have a board of directors, that's okay. They can simply put an A. In section C, you can then see that I go on to request list all candidates of key employees. So this is going to include employees within C1A and C1B who will act on behalf of the organization. Again, this is very important because you're going to want to make sure that whoever those key individuals are that are operating on behalf of the company know your position on bribery, corruption, modern-day slavery, what your stance is on facilitation payments, and so forth. So again, this section is also very important. In section C2, I then go on to ask, does any key person listed in C1, A, B, or C hold or maintain additional directorships, ownership interests, or employment outside of the candidate business? If no, that's okay. If yes, then I want to know about it. And that is primarily because I'm looking for any potential conflicts of interest. So if we keep going, You then see that in Section B, I ask, has any key person listed in C1, A, B, or C ever held a government job or been in the military? If yes, I want to know about it. My primary objective here is really to determine if there should be any sort of revolving door reviews that need to take place. If we then go on to Section C, does your country impose laws, rules, regulations, or restrictions on individuals in your country after they leave public service, including the military? If yes, I would like them to explain. If no, that is great. I would just say that if the entity or candidate answers yes, you're going to want to make sure that you flow this through your in-house counsel, again, to check for those revolving door reviews. In Section C3, does any person, entity, government, or government agency not listed in Question C1 have any management right or financial interest in the candidate's business? Again, if the answer is yes, I ask them to explain. And what I'm doing here is I'm really looking for red flags or any potential conflicts of interest that the candidate may pose to the organization. In Section C3A, I then go on to ask, will any third-party intermediaries or other persons or entities not previously mentioned be involved in transactions that will most likely provide services to Kristen Franks Manufacturing Incorporated? If the candidate says yes, what I'm looking to determine is to make sure that the candidate is not acting as a middleman and that these are simply not pass-through costs. So I want to make sure that I'm contracting directly with the entity that I need to be doing business with. So if there are third parties that will be acting on behalf of an intermediary that I'm going to be hiring, I certainly want full disclosure of that relationship. So if we move on now to Section D, and thank you, I just want to pause and say thank you all for hanging with me. I hope my voice is not putting you to sleep, but certainly these are all relevant questions that you're going to want to make sure that you have within your questionnaire. So in Section D, you can then see that my emphasis is going to be on conflicts of interest here. So for D1, I go on to ask, does the candidate or any key person listed in C1 have any service or other contracts directly with a government or government-controlled entity? If they answer yes, then certainly I want to know about it. If they answer no, then that's great. But what I'm really looking to determine here is this candidate working with a state-owned entity, or are they controlled by a state-owned entity? In Section D2, does any key person listed in C1 currently hold any position with or have any duties for any political party or political campaign? Obviously, if the answer is yes, I then go on to request more information. And you'll see here that I even ask the third party, do you think there is a potential conflict? If the answer is yes, then hopefully they'll be transparent. If not, then it's still something that I'm going to want to look into. In D3, I then go on to ask, is any key person listed in C1 a candidate for a political office? Yes or no? If they answer yes, I want to know about it. In Section D4, I then go on to ask, are any family members of any key person listed in number C1 above? So you'll see here that within D4A, employed or otherwise engaged in any capacity by any government entity, including the military. In B, employed by or have duties for any political party or political campaign. And in C, if they're a candidate for a political office. If yes, please identify the person and provide the relative's name, relationship, and position below. Again, this is really to vet out any potential conflicts of interest. In Section D5, I then go on to ask, will the candidate market to a government or government agency including the military. If they say yes, I definitely want to know about it because this obviously is a red flag to the organization and it poses a risk. It does serve as an indicator that there is some risk that's going to be inherited there. In Section E, I then go on to ask about compliance information. So does the candidate currently have a written policy addressing bribery? If they say no, during any subsequent follow-up phone calls or emails or interviews, you're gonna want to ask why they don't have a written policy addressing bribery. And if they say yes, that they do have a policy, you're going to want to request a copy of that policy to see their stance on bribery and corruption, and more importantly, facilitation payments. So for those of you who do not know what a facilitation payment is, it is a tip or gratuity to secure or expedite a routine or necessary service. In a nutshell, it's a grease payment, it's a kickback, it can be perceived as a bribe. So that's why it's really important to understand what their policy is on bribery and what their policy is on facilitation payments. In Section E2, I then go on to ask, if retained, please provide the primary banking information. So hopefully this isn't new to any of you, but this criteria and portion of the questionnaire is also very important. So what I'm really looking to determine here is if I have a candidate who is domiciled within the U.S., but they tell me that they want to receive payment at their primary bank, and it's in Isle of Man, the Bahamas, let's say Panama, it's in Andorra, it's in the Cayman Islands. If their primary banking relationship is not within the U.S. and that's where they want to receive payment, that is a substantial red flag to me and something that I will definitely want to ask questions about and look into. In Section E3, I then go on to ask, please indicate the method or methods by which the candidate wants to receive payment. So are they looking to be paid via a check, a wire transfer? Are they looking to be paid in Bitcoin, in gift cards, in cash? Are they looking for cash to be sent to a post office box in Des Moines, Iowa? If the answer to any of that is yes, then certainly that is a red flag for the organization. So then in Section E4, I then go on to ask, please respond to the following questions on behalf of the candidate and all key people listed in C1. So these are going to be the individuals who are either shareholders, owners, directors, in management that are going to be operating on behalf of the organization. So I'm going to pause and I'm just going to take a drink of my coffee for just a second. And I will say that,
Kristen, you are sounding great. You deserve a drink.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary. So you can see that within Section E4, this next portion of the questionnaire is going to be very wordy, so just please hang in there with me. So in question A, has the candidate or any key person listed in C1 ever been convicted of violating any rules or regulations governing the purchase or sale of goods or provided services to or by any government? If they answer yes, it's obviously a red flag, so let's hope that they answer no. In question B, I then go on to ask, has the candidate or any key person listed in C1 ever been interviewed, deposed, or subpoenaed in connection with any litigation or investigation involving any procurement regulation? In Section C, I then go on to ask, has the candidate or any key person listed in C1 ever been found guilty of violating any laws governing donations, contributions, or any other form of remunerations to any government official? So this is basically just a fancy word for payment. So is the candidate, have they ever been found guilty for making payments to government officials? In Section D, I then go on to ask, has the candidate or any key person listed in C1 ever been interviewed, deposed, or subpoenaed in connection with any litigation or investigation involving any law governing donations, contributions, or any other form of payment to any government official. In Section E, has the candidate or any key person listed in C1 ever been interviewed, subpoenaed, or asked to testify before any legislative body concerning fraud or abuse with regard to government procurement? Yes or no? In Section F, has the candidate or any key person listed in C1 ever been found guilty or settled outside of court of any violation of securities or commodities trading laws? Yes or no? In Section G, has the candidate or any key person listed in C1 ever been interviewed, deposed, or subpoenaed in connection with any litigation or investigation involving any violations of securities or trading laws? In H, has the candidate or any key person listed in C1 ever been found guilty of any violation of any laws governing the regulation of antitrust or anti-competition practices? Again, this is very important. In I, has the candidate or any key person listed in C1 ever been the subject of or mentioned by name in any newspaper or magazine article in an adverse manner? So I'm going to pause right here for just a second within Section I, and I'm just going to say that this is where it becomes very important to make sure that you have a solution that can screen for structured adverse media. And if you don't have a solution where you can screen for that type of content, feel free to contact me after the webinar. In Section J, has the candidate or any key person listed in C1 ever been charged, interviewed, or found guilty concerning tax evasion? So this is, again, very important. In Section K, has the candidate or any key person listed in C1 ever been convicted of a felony or other criminal acts for any manner not listed above? This is really my character-based question, so I'm trying to determine if the person that I'm going to contract with has good morals and is an upstanding citizen. So that's the importance to me for question K. So in Section I, excluding traffic charges, has any key person listed in C1 ever been arrested, charged, cited, or held by law enforcement authorities, regardless of whether the charge was dropped, dismissed, or a verdict of not guilty was entered? Again, this is a character question for me. In Section M, I then go on to ask, has the candidate of any corporation, partnership, or other entity in which the candidate owned more than a 5% interest ever been debarred from competing for World Bank contracts? So for those of you who do not know, the World Bank's objective is to alleviate poverty. So if you have an entity or an individual that says that they have been debarred by the World Bank, you will not only want to know, but you will want to ask and follow up on what have you done to clean up your practices since that debarment. So in Section N, you'll then see, has the candidate or any key person listed in C1 ever had a security clearance denied or revoked? If they answer yes, that is a red flag. And you'll see I forgot to put my yes or no check boxes, so you'll want to fix that in your own questionnaire. In Section O, has the key person listed in C1 ever been discharged from any armed forces with other than an honorable discharge? Again, if yes, you're going to want to know. This is a character question for me that I've thrown in there. In Section P, has the candidate or any corporation, partnership, or other entity in which the candidate has more than a 5% interest or is an owner, partner, officer, director, or key employee been the subject of any voluntary or involuntary bankruptcy or other similar proceedings? If they answer yes, I ask for an explanation. I want to know if they are mismanaging their finances. So it's important to make sure that you're asking if bankruptcy has ever been declared. Okay, so let's move on. So For Section Q, I'm just going to go through these, but the main objective of Section Q is just to make sure that if your candidate says that they are a drug trafficker, a narcotics kingpin, a terrorist, that they're on the OFAC sanctions list, or that they've been debarred by the DTC for any reason, just know that's a hard pass. Don't pass go, don't collect $200. This is going to be a major red flag for you if any candidate answers yes. So in Section Q, is the candidate or any key person listed in C1 named on any of the following lists? So are they on an SDN list? Are they a specially designated on a terrorist list? The specially designated narcotics traffickers list, the specially designated narcotics traffickers kingpins list, the U.S. Department of Treasury OFAC list of foreign terrorist organizations, the U.S. Department of Commerce denied parties list, the U.S. Department of State DTC debarred parties list, and any sort of OFAC listing. Now, these questions, A through H, are not exhaustive, so you're going to want to make sure that you tailor these questions to your specific portfolio. Within Section E5, has any company or any key person listed in C1 ever interacted with government or government officials in connection with the projected type of work? If the answer is yes, I ask for an explanation, so you're going to want to collect that data. In question E6, has your organization or to your knowledge any of its vendors made any payments of official government fees or taxes in connection with the projected type of work? If yes, please provide an explanation. In E7, and I just want to point out that this is a very important question. This is my facilitations payment question without actually stating facilitation payment. So has your organization or to your knowledge any of its vendors paid tips, gratuities, or other unofficial payments to government officials in connection with the projected type of work? If the answer is yes, if they tell you that they're making facilitation payments, that is a red flag, so you're going to want to follow up on that. In Section E8, I then go on to ask, please describe your organization's gift and entertainment practices concerning the projected type of work. This is also very important because gifts and entertainment can be seen as a form of bribery, so you're going to want to understand what their policy is. So in Section F, and thank you everyone for hanging in there with me, we're almost done with the questionnaire. So in Section F, I then go on to ask about similar compliance reviews and questions that they've gone through. So in F1, does your organization work with other customers similar to this entity? In F2, in the past 12 months, has your organization gone through a similar review process with other customers? If so, then I want to know. And this is a really good way to benchmark, what your competitors or other organizations are doing. So if the candidate is willing to be transparent and they say yes, then you can go on to ask, who have you gone through this process with? In Section F3, if your organization is domiciled in the U.S. but operates within the EU, does it have a Privacy Shield certification? So this is my question surrounding data privacy. So I'm looking for their stance on GDPR and if they do have that Privacy Shield certification. In Section G, I'm also requesting all supporting documentation. So does your organization have any of the following available? Select all that apply. So organization's charter and registration information, evidence from an official government registry that the organization is in good standing, a code of ethics and business conduct, a written anti-bribery policy or guidelines, a compliance certification, or any other respective compliance documentation. If we then go on to Section H, this is really my take on on compliance for good measure. It's just something that I add into my questionnaires to supplement the content. So acknowledgement of Kristen Frank's Manufacturing Incorporated Standards of Business Conduct. So this is where I will ask them, have you previously received a copy of our Standards of Business Conduct? Please answer the following question. I have received a copy of Kristen Frank's Manufacturing Incorporated Standards of Business Conduct. I understand and agree to follow these standards of business conduct. Yes or no? If they answer no, then obviously that's a red flag. You're going to want to follow up on it. And then in H2, I then go on to state my position on the FCPA. So I understand that the U.S. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, also known as the FCPA, prohibits the payment directly or indirectly of money or anything of value to any government official to obtain, retain, or maintain business, to secure an improper advantage, or to affect or influence any government act or decision. And then I go on to state, I agree to abide by the FCPA and all local laws, this is very important, relating to payments to government officials. So just know that if you operate in jurisdictions outside of the U.S., you're going to want to make sure that those candidates are complying with local law. Then you'll see that the person whose signature appears below is authorized to certify on behalf of the candidate that the foregoing is true and correct. The information provided above is, to the best of my knowledge and belief, current, accurate, and complete. And then I also like this last caveat. I agree to notify Kristen Frank's Manufacturing promptly of any material changes to the information provided herein. So in the event that the organization has a change to any of the questions notated above, you definitely want to put the responsibility on that candidate to notify you of those changes. I then go on to ask for a signature, date, title, the day that the questionnaire was executed. And then for this final page, I also, for good measure, just provide a reminder. Please provide copies of your business registrations, all of your CVs and resumes for the persons identified in question C1, any company brochures from question A14, and then I also go on to remind them about any sort of financial statements or financial reference as requested in question B2. And then I tell them, please return this questionnaire to this address, attention to the compliance officer, and to also send a PDF to this respective email address. So I realize that I've just covered a lot of information and that this is a fairly lengthy questionnaire. And so I just want to state that it is up to you and your CCO, your Chief Compliance Officer, or your in-house counsel to really tailor your questionnaire to your specific portfolio. And so with that, I'm going to pause for just a second. I'm going to take a drink of coffee. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover now our certification of no improper payments to government officials. So give me just a second, and I will pull that up for all of you.
So it's not time for the next poll. Am I right about that, Kristen?
That is correct, Mary.
Okay.
We're going to cover the next. We'll cover the next poll question after I go over this certification.
Okay.
Okay. So within the certification, and you can see that I've put this in parentheses really, that you're going to want to change this out to really match what your organization's name is. So for purposes of this webinar, Kristen Frank's Manufacturing Incorporated has a policy that prohibits its agents, suppliers, vendors, and all respective third parties from making any improper payment to government officials. For the purpose of this policy, I then go on to define what a foreign government official is. A foreign government official refers to any employee of a government agency. This includes anyone who works for any government body, with particular application to employees with influence over buying decisions on behalf of their government employer or those involved in public policy decisions. This includes, for example, elected or appointed officials, heads of agencies or departments, doctors employed by state hospitals, customs officials, or local tax authorities. professors employed by state universities, lawyers with public agencies, public libraries, school superintendents, principals, or teachers. Pursuant to this policy, it is important that no money, gift, or anything of value, including tips, gratuities, or facilitation payments, be provided to an individual government official that is not a bona fide government fee in connection with any services for which you are providing goods or services. In the next paragraph, you can see that as a result, Kristen Franks Manufacturing Incorporated asks that you confirm your company will not make any improper payments in violation of this policy. By signing this certification, you hereby warrant and represent that your company will abide by this policy. You can then see that I go on to ask for a signature, title, company, and date. And then I also go on to state that the certification must be signed by either the principal executive of the principal operating officer of the company, or in his or her individual capacity if the services rendered are done by a private person and not on behalf of a company. So this certification I would typically send out at the same time that I was sending my questionnaire, just so that the third-party intermediary is very aware of my stance on anti-bribery and corruption and my code of conduct and facilitation payments.
I'm going to interrupt you here because we're not seeing the certificate. So if you don't mind, could you take the step of reloading it?
Oh, yes, ma'am. Thank you for notifying. Let me hit share my screen again.
Okay. And that way, then we'll all know what you were talking about. I appreciated it earlier when you said that people can customize what you're doing. You're sort of showing everything for everybody. And just to confirm, this is for vendors, contractors, employees, even customers? Is this these kinds of questionnaires?
That is correct. So hopefully, can you confirm that you can see my screen now, Mary?
Yep, it has arrived.
Okay, wonderful.
Thank you.
So yes, so what I would encourage you all to do is to really tailor the certification to your portfolio. And really just what I'm doing is I'm looking for the individual and or the entity that's going to be working on behalf of the company to acknowledge my stance on anti-bribery and corruption and facilitation payments, and that they are absolutely not acceptable. So as I mentioned earlier, what I will usually do is I will send out my questionnaire and my certification at the same time, along with the code of conduct. So from there, I think I'm going to transition back into the slides. And then, Mary, I think that it's time for another poll question.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. This is a question about your organization again. Do you have the proper solutions in place to verify the information provided? So your choices are about the same as last time. Yes. Some solutions, but not all. No. And I'm just not sure. So again, the question is, does your organization have the proper solutions in place to verify the information that's been provided? And while people are filling out that form or that poll, there's a question here. Does a questionnaire need to be this lengthy if the third party is low risk?
So, Mary, that's a great question. The answer to that question is no. You really need to tailor your questionnaire to the type of relationship that is going to be involved, and it really needs to be based on what type of relationship you're going to have with that third party. Okay, great. Let's go ahead and take a look at our results. And the question is, does your organization have the proper solutions in place? And there's your answers. 35% say yes, and over 50% say some, but not all. Oh, wow. Okay, so those are very interesting results, because I know that within this webinar we have global participants. So I would just encourage you that if today you do not have the proper solutions in place, please get in touch with me. At LexisNexis, we have some very comprehensive solutions that you can implement to really mitigate risk. So just please feel free to reach out to us. And I also want to state, just please hang in there with me because we're going to cover some additional content that is relevant to questionnaires and certifications. In the interest of time, I want to go ahead and move on to that content within the presentation. So bear with me while this populates. Okay, so let's assume that you have created this comprehensive questionnaire and certification. You send it out to your respective third parties. You receive it back. So now what do? So what you're going to do after you receive that data is you are going to meticulously comb through the information that is provided within that questionnaire to ensure that there are not any red flags. So with that, again, we're going to cover these bullets. Leverage the information received to try and identify red flags. Screen the organization's legal and DBA entity name. No surprise there, I mentioned that earlier. Screen all of the owners, directors, and shareholders or individuals who will be acting on behalf of the company. You're going to want to review the business registrations provided to ensure legitimacy and that they are not expired. You're also going to verify the CVs and brochures and financials provided. And then depending on the level of risk, you are definitely going to want to follow up with that third party if they are high risk, especially to conduct either an in-person interview or a phone screening to verify the information that was provided and to also take the time to educate them on your internal policies and procedures and your code of conduct and stance on the FCPA and facilitation payments. The final thought here for now what is you're also going to want to utilize the data to follow up on, let me restart that. Utilize the follow-up screening to also educate the third party on your ABC policy. So again, you're just going to want to take the time during that in-person interview and phone screening to follow up with them and educate them on your policy. If we then go on to considerations that you should make whenever you're working within international jurisdictions, I would just encourage you to really ensure that your code of conduct is available in multiple languages to support the jurisdictions that you work in. So if you know you have a presence in Mexico, make sure your code of conduct is in Spanish. Same thing with China. If you operate in China, you're going to want to make sure that your code of conduct is in Mandarin or Portuguese for Brazil. I would really just make sure that code of conduct is tailored to meet the jurisdiction that you're operating in. The second thing is that you're also going to want to make sure that the questionnaire and certification you use are available in the appropriate language for that third party. So not everyone reads and speaks and writes in English, so sometimes questionnaires need to be made available in multiple languages. So I would just take that into consideration. The last thing is